We on Fire Sports Podcast, The Spot, season number 4, episode number 40. And yeah, man, we right at the weekend, man. I hit you guys up with a special episode, man. Saturday edition on We on Fire Sports Podcast, The Spot. If it's your first time listening, We on Fire Sports Podcast, The Spot. We provide high-five takes and analysis across the sporting landscape. And if you're an OG of the show, man, I appreciate the check-in. And yeah, man, we at the weekend, man. Special Final Four weekend, man. Special Saturday edition, man, of the podcast, man. And woo, boy, we finally here. And the Final Four jumps off, man, later on this evening, man. We got an epic matchup. As we all know, we have 4 number 1 seeds get into the Final Four this year. You know, you got, the Duke Blue Devils in the building, man. John Shire, his first, appearance in the Final Four. Him and Cooper Flagg. Also, too, man, Con Knipple and company, man. They just trying to put it down, man, for Duke University. Get into the Final Four. They got a tough matchup, man, with the Houston Cougars. Shout out to Kevin Sampson. Just the job he's done down there, man, in Houston, man. And so they get into the Final Four as well as a number 1 seed. Also, too, man, it's just a whole situation on the other side of the bracket as well. We got Florida taking on Auburn, SEC clash as these two teams lock horns again. The winner goes on to the national championship game on Monday. And, woo, boy, this thing is heating up, man. And we're going to get right into it, man. We're going to get right into it in this episode number 40. Also, too, man, congratulations to the Hall of Fame, man. Hall of Fame. We got 2 epic hoopers, man, getting into the Hall of Fame, man. Word on the street is we got Carmelo Anthony as well as Dwight Superman Howard getting into the Hall of Fame. Both these gentlemen, man, well deserving. First off on MELO, man, just a triple threat scorer. Got a chance to see MELO play a couple times in person in his NBA, career, with the Denver Nuggets. Also, too, most notably the New York Knicks. Kind of moved around a little bit towards the latter part of his career, man, but well deserving for Carmelo Anthony, man. Won a national championship at Syracuse in 2002. Great team. It was Jim Boeheim's first NCAA championship, man. Fabulous freshman. Did a great job with that ball club, man, winning most outstanding player in the Final Four. And Dwight Superman Howard, man. Dwight Superman Howard gets in, man. Dwight Howard, man, outstanding talent. Got a chance to watch Dwight Howard play, man, down here in Atlanta when he was in high school. Just a tremendous talent, man. Just an uber athlete, man, catching the ball at the box. For nice little oops. A tremendous defensive player. Couple-time defensive player of the year in the NBA. And a lot of people thought his career kind of went short, towards the latter part of his career, man, with the back injuries and various injuries. We all know, man, he moved on to the Los Angeles Lakers after leaving Orlando and that whole epic situation with him and Stan Van Gundy. Didn't work out in Los Angeles, man, as, Kobe just felt like he didn't bring the fire out there in L.A., man. But, man, you can't knock the Hall of Fame, man. It's just a tremendous honor. Congratulations, man, to both of them, both of their families, man. It's just a big deal getting into the NBA Hall of Fame. So I definitely tip my cap to both of those brothers, man, getting in. And as I mentioned a little bit earlier, well deserving. Also, too, man, just on the hoop tip, we had the McDonald's All-American game jumped off, this week. It was a nice little look, man, just to see, top 24 players in the country, man, get it in. It was a nice little situation, man. McDonald's always throws a nice little event. So shout out, not only the boys getting in, but also to the young ladies. I checked their game out as well, the McDonald's All-American game. And we definitely see all these gentlemen on campus next season at their respective schools. So that was a nice little caveat to take a look as well. Also, too, man, we got baseball back. Baseball now, man, the first week of the season. There's a lot of fan bases out there, man, that's geeked up right now, man. 2 good teams just come to note playing some outstanding baseball, man. Obviously, the Los Angeles Dodgers, man, they just been straight on one, man. Just straight on one. A lot of people feel that they're going to repeat again as World Series champions this year. So we'll definitely see what the Dodgers do, but they looking like a runaway train right now, man. So congratulations to them on the hot start. Also, too, we had the San Diego Padres with a hot start. Until my Cubs was able to knock them off. They was undefeated, first winning the first 7 games, man. But the Cubs was able to knock them off, man, at Wrigley Field in a home opener. And so I know a lot of you guys are just geeked up with the baseball season, me as well. I'm very, very fortunate, having 2 baseball clubs, man, just the Chicago White Sox and also 2 the Chicago Cubs. I'm getting a little heat and a little pressure, man, from my friends at the Weekly Dog Sports Betting Podcast, my man E and my man Mako Scott. And, they trying to make me pick a side, man. And I told them, man, I'm a Chicago sports diplomat. I can't pick a side on that, man. I love both franchises, man. I definitely enjoy going to both ballparks, just being in the city, man. So I'm not going to pick a side, man. I'm just kind of a Chi-Town sports diplomat on that end. Also, too, on another note, man, made my another appearance on the Weekly Dog Sports Betting Podcast, man, on a Hot Wire segment. Slid in, man, just with E and Mako Scott, man, just getting it in, talking NCAA Final Four. Also, too, a few thoughts across the NBA season. So, once again, man, I appreciate them gentlemen, inviting me in. And you can catch that at Firebox 2300, man, on YouTube, man. Guys out there doing an epic job, man, on their sports betting podcast. So, salute to both of those gentlemen. Also, in the NFL, we got the TUSH push. Looks like the TUSH push, man, most famously known by the Philadelphia Eagles. Looks like the NFL is trying to outlaw the TUSH push, man. And for me, it's a situation where I'm going to keep it all the way 100 with you guys. I don't like to play. The reason I don't like to play is that I just don't think that you should allow another offensive player to push you from behind and use leverage. To me, it's a disadvantage to the defense. There's been a lot of things said about, the safe and healthy precautions just in the play in itself. But to me, I remember, the NFL not allowing players to push players from behind, gaining leverage. This is supposed to be the National Football League. No disrespect to rugby, but this ain't rugby, man. And so I'm one to say that they definitely should outlaw the play from a standpoint of the leverage of guy pushing a guy from behind. They need to get rid of that part of the play in itself. So NFL looks like they're pushing to get rid of the TUSH push, and we'll see where it go. We'll see where it goes. They got a vote coming up, I believe, in a couple weeks to try to make it official on that. We'll definitely see what it do. Also, too, man, on this episode, man, we're going to get into the whole Ja Morant thing, man. Here we go again, Ja Morant down in Memphis. Memphis, a couple weeks ago, man, they fired Taylor Jenkins, man. Got rid of the head coach, Taylor Jenkins, who had been in Memphis for 6 seasons. That was a whole situation in itself. Not sure what Memphis was doing so close to the playoffs. To me, I just think that it was probably in their best interest to get rid of Taylor Jenkins, man, during the offseason. But Memphis, they doing what they need to do, I guess. But this team has not been playing well since they got rid of Taylor Jenkins. And they're on a slippery slope. And Ja Morant, in his situation, man, just going ahead and pulling out the gun gesture, man, against the Golden State Warriors. And, went out and pulled it again against the Miami Heat a couple days later. And the NBA went out and just basically fined him for $75,000 for the gesture in itself. And a lot of people feel that, he's being targeted by the NBA. And I'm not one just to say that. Because here's the thing. At the end of the day, Ja Morant, he's part of the NBA lexicon, man. His employer is the National Basketball Association. And Adam Silver, I've had my remarks about Adam Silver. I think he's too soft. I think he's too friendly to the players. I think some of the players have definitely taken advantage of his kindness. But we've seen him put the goon hand down before. The whole situation with Donald Sterling, former Los Angeles Clippers owner. We know about that whole situation with Donald Sterling. Banned him for life. So that probably was his most gangsterous move he's had since being commissioner of the NBA. But this whole thing with Ja Morant, man, and and I understand the swag and, just the flamboyance, just celebrating at the basket and so forth and just being geeked up on the court. I don't have nothing wrong with that as long as it's within the sportsmanship part of the game. Now, if the league has warned you definitely and you've already took a big time suspension from this whole situation before, bro, just cool your heels a little bit. Just a little bit. Just cool your heels, Ja Morant, man. So we'll definitely see, what he got cracking moving forward, man, as the Memphis Grizzlies right now is in that wild, wild west trying to gain some traction, man. Get themselves a nice little seed before the NBA playoffs jump off. Also, can't forget about the Golden State Warriors, man, playing some outstanding basketball, man. They just knocked off the Denver Nuggets last night. It was a good basketball game, man, between them and Denver. Man, Jokic put on the show once again, but the Golden State Warriors, man, ever since they got Jimmy Butler, and, I got to eat some crow on that. I was very, very skeptical of Jimmy Butler. I just thought that whole situation in Miami didn't play out well, but right now, Jimmy has done two things. One, he's kept his mouth shut, and two, He's given the Golden State Warriors some umph since he's been there. And this team is looking real, real good, man. Shout out to Brandon Podziemski. He's done a great job over the last couple of weeks. Looks like they got a find in him. And so we'll see what the Golden State Warriors do, man, as they try to move up. It's kind of, a lock-in race, man, for that number 3 seed in the Western Conference. We'll definitely see what that do. And coming up, I'm going to get into the NCAA Final Four, man. We're going to get into the Final Four coming up later on this afternoon. And definitely we'll see what that thing do. First and foremost, man, I appreciate all the love and the feedback. I appreciate your ear. We on Fire Sports Podcast, the spot. Welcome back. And yeah, we got the NCAA Final Four jumping off coming up in a couple hours here, man. It's just an epic situation down there in San Antonio, man. And, I just love the Final Four. Just the whole theatrics with the Final Four, man, is to me one of the best sporting events in across the sporting landscape. I've had an opportunity and been blessed, man, to go to 2 Final Fours. Went to the Final Four, man. First one that I went to was back in 2007, man. We had the Florida Gators repeat. They knocked off Ohio State in the national championship game. Ohio State had the epic Greg Oden and Mike Conley Jr. A good start, good squad, with Thad Matta, the head coach. I had a highly touted freshman team. DeJuan Cook was on that ball club as well. And the Florida Gators, with just Joakim Noah and Al Horford, who's still out here, man, just getting it in for the Boston Celtics, and Billy Donovan. Shout out to Corey Brewer on that ball club, man, and I watched that team cut down the Nets. The second time I had an opportunity to go to the Final Four again was in Atlanta for the 75th anniversary of the Final Four, and it was one of the best sporting events I've ever been to. One, just to see all the former players come back, just come through and fall through in the building, man. It's my first time ever seeing Kareem Abdul-Jabbar up in person, man, just at the event as well, man. One of the greatest college basketball players of all time. And so we all know about the illustrious career that he had, with the Milwaukee Bucks and the Los Angeles Lakers in the NBA. So it was a great, great event. And we back at it again here in San Antonio. But before I get into the men's part of the Final Four, man, I definitely got to send a shout out to the ladies, man. Last night was an epic situation as we had the UConn Huskies, man, move on, knock off, and straight blew out UCLA last night. Man, they just played some good team basketball, moving the ball around, man. Strong was just out there playing just strong, just versatile, being able to give you the inside and outside game, man. And UConn just a ball movement and just selfless play. Also, too, on the defensive end, especially in the second half, man, they just put the clamp straight up on UCLA. Got that nice little blowout, man, for them to move on to the national championship game tomorrow. That will jump off. And they take on a team that, to me, I think has been a little bit undersold in college basketball, women's college basketball, and that's the South Carolina Gamecocks. Just the job that Don Staley has done at the University of South Carolina, man, just goes without saying. This team is on the verge of winning 3 national championships in the last 4 years. They've had some great players come up through there, Aja Wilson, Aaliyah Boston, just to say the least. And this ball club doesn't have what I call just the super top flight, front person on the ball club, like Aja Wilson, who just got that statue outside the school not too long ago. They don't have that one polarizing player, man, but this team plays some team basketball. Raven Johnson, one of the OGs on that ball club, man, playing well. And just, I love what I'm seeing from South Carolina. And, they was able to move on and get themselves into the national championship game, epic win against the University of Texas. And so the table is set, man. Paige Breckers, this is going to be her last forte in the college basketball, man. It's going to be her last college basketball game. This young lady came over a lot, just with the various ACL injuries and she was one of the best high school players I've seen, not too far from where I'm at, man, in the state of South Carolina, ironically. And she takes on her home state, man, in South Carolina. And, Gino Auriemma, just the job he's done at the University of Connecticut just goes without saying, man. They just been a basketball factory. But This is an epic showdown, man. This is a heavyweight championship bout. You got a school that in South Carolina is just, I ain't gonna say the new kids on the block, but they've been just holding it down in college basketball, man, over the last, say, 3 to 4 years. And you got Connecticut, man, a oldie but goodie. As I mentioned, they have numerous amount of players, from Diana Taurasi, obviously, and Sue Bird, as I saw, just watched that telecast of the game the other day. They was outstanding, man, at the University of Connecticut in their little tenure. And so, it goes all the way back to Rebecca Lobo, man, in the mid-'90s. And so Gino's on the verge, man, of getting another national championship. I can't wait for this game. And for me, as you guys, like I said, you can definitely check me out, man, on the Weekly Dog Sports Betting Podcast on the Hot Wire segment at 5box2300. I made my prediction there. I got South Carolina knocking off the University of Connecticut. I'm not going to front, though. Connecticut is playing the best basketball they've played all season long. And they're going to be a tough out. And I got a feeling that this game is going to come down to the last couple minutes of the game. I just feel that South Carolina's defense is going to be able to come through and make, a nice little play towards the end of this game, man, to cap it off, man. And I got the South Carolina Lady Gamecocks cutting down the net. So we'll see what that do. And now to the men's side. Man. Once again, we got 4 number 1 seeds in the Final Four this year. First time we've seen that since 2008. That was an epic Final Four. It's all known for the big three Mario Chalmers hit towards the end of the second half to take the game into overtime and just build self first national championship as a coach. And I'll start on the Duke and Houston side. Duke and Houston, man, they play tonight at 8:45 Eastern Standard Time. And I ain't gonna front, man. I got Houston winning this basketball game. I got to stick to my bracket. I predicted the Houston Cougars, man, to win a national championship. And so, to me, Houston, the best defensive team in college basketball. And Duke, on the other hand, man, this is a big team. This team is playing some tremendous defense. I mean, what they did to Alabama, man, oh, my Lord, man. Just, with Con Knipple, you obviously got Cooper Flagg and, just holding it down. Can't forget about my man Proctor, who I think to me, he's going to be the table setter for Duke, because I think he's going to have a good game, man, for them to be able to knock off Houston. Like I said, Houston on the other side, man, LJ Cryer, this guy, man, is just a veteran. First time we seen this gentleman, he won a national championship at Baylor a couple years ago. So, he's on the verge of making potential history to be the first collegiate basketball player to win a national championship at 2 different schools. That's never been done before. And so, man, this one's going to be tough, man. As I mentioned, I just think that Houston, they just play a ugly style of basketball on the defensive side. They do have some firepower. I think this is Kevin Sampson's best offensive team that he's had down at the University of Houston. And so I just think they're going to be locked and loaded. I think they're going to be geeked up and pumped up, man, to knock off Duke. I think this game does come down to the end as well. And I got Houston knocking off the Duke Blue Devils, man, to get to the national championship game. Ironically, Duke is a 4.5-point favorite. I think, to me, that plays in the hands of Houston, man, just coming in. They've had an outstanding season coming out of the Big 12 all year long. To me, it was a conference that I felt like was underrated all year long. Obviously, we had, the SEC getting 14 teams in the NCAA tournament. That's the first time that has ever happened for one conference. Easily the best season a conference has ever had in a regular season. But I got the Cougars moving on to the national championship game. And speaking of the SEC, man, we got Auburn taking on Florida. Florida in this game, man, is a 2.5-point favorite. Florida, they playing, to me, probably the best basketball in the entire tournament from a standpoint of they've had every kind of win that we've seen in this tournament, from a standpoint of, blowing out a team, to, that whole situation with UConn, kind of just took them to the tilt. Then, they was able to bounce back and, blow out Maryland. And then they got behind the 8 ball again, man, and which was one of the best college basketball games I've seen all season, man. Them in Texas Tech, because they was able to get off the ropes and knock off Texas Tech. So Florida has shown to me, man, that they're a resilient team. You got Clayton Jr., one of the best basketball players in the country. He's a candidate for National Player of the Year. And ironically, on the other side with Aubrey and Bruce Pearl, this team plays with a swag, man. They play with an edge. Broome on the other side, he's a candidate for National Player of the Year as well, along with Cooper Flagg. So it's real cool to see, 3 guys who are, candidates for National Player of the Year playing in Final Four. Like I said, Bruce Pearl, man, this guy's just a chameleon, man. I remember when he was at the University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee, back in the early, mid 2000s, moved on to the University of Tennessee. He had his, black cloud and that whole situation at the University of Tennessee. He had to move on, went down to Auburn, and got Auburn right. They was ranked number 1 in the country for several weeks this season. But I got Auburn, man. I got Auburn winning this basketball game. I just think that Broome, man, he's a tough guy to cover. He had been a little nicked up, but I think he's going to be pretty much kind of healthy for this basketball game, man. And they'll kill you with the inside and outside game for Auburn. I just think that, to me, that's the X factor. I think that Florida, even though they've been shooting the cover off the ball, these two teams know each other. They obviously locked horns, during the regular season in the SEC. But I got Auburn, man, moving forward to the national championship game on Monday to take on the Houston Cougars. And as I mentioned a little earlier, I got Houston cut down the nets. Ironically, both of my picks is both of the underdogs in this basketball game. But that's what the tournament's about. All 4 of these teams can easily win the national championship. That's why I'm digging this year's version of the Final Four, man. You got 4 heavyweight teams getting ready to lock horns and get it in and see what it do. So that's my look. That's my look across the Final Four as things are jumping off. Don't forget, man, you guys check out the Sunday game, national championship game, man, between UConn as well as South Carolina as they get it in tomorrow. First and foremost, I appreciate all the love and the feedback. I appreciate your ear. We on Fire Sports Podcast, the spot. All right, before we get out of here, we definitely got to talk some NBA. Man, the NBA, man, is heating up as we do the final stretch of the NBA season, especially in the Western Conference. It's just lock and loaded on the seeding. But before I get into the NBA, got to talk about what I saw the other day just in college football and the college football landscape as we transition to the NFL draft coming up in a couple of weeks. And we had the pro day of Shedeur Sanders as well as Travis Hunter at the University of Colorado. And definitely it's a situation where, Deion Sanders, man, is a master salesman, man. I saw him, definitely have an interview just with the whole allure of just the University of Colorado, man, and just the program and just how he feels, having potentially 2 young men be in the top 5 of the NFL draft coming up this April. And I was definitely checking it out, man. Definitely checking it out, just to see, just how Shedeur Sanders do. It's been a whole talk, with him potentially going number 2 to the Cleveland Browns. There's been a lot of talk that he may slip in this NFL draft and going, all the way down into the 20s perhaps. And, you got the New York Giants, they was in the building as well, checking out his pro day. And so it's gonna be must-see television, man, just to see where, Shedeur Sanders go. Just, with the whole situation with the, situation in New York, preferably, because it's been put out there, man, is that, the whole situation with Brian Daboll and Joe Shane, the general manager of the New York Giants, is that their jobs is on the line. And so they definitely brought in Jameis Winston. You brought in Russell Wilson, 2 veteran quarterbacks that I think can potentially kind of keep the boat afloat just a little bit. But they need a quarterback for the future. And just, the whole situation, just in New York could be a crash and burn. Obviously, Cleveland, they went out there and said that, that whole Deshaun Watson experiment for them has been a crash and burn as well. I mean, if you look at just how many picks this team gave up, as well as $275 million guaranteed, man, to Deshaun Watson. It's definitely been the worst trade in NFL history without question. I think, for them, they got to reset the table, man, and get a quarterback in there, for the future. So I got a whole situation, man, that I feel that it could be them picking number 2, Shedeur Sanders. That really could be into play, just with the whole Cleveland Brown experience. Obviously, Myles Garrett, he wanted out of Cleveland. Went back to Cleveland, though, after they broke him off with a huge bag of money. And so it's definitely going to be a situation, man, that we're going to see what's going on, and it's going to be interesting to see. But I just think that for me, watching that pro day, it just kind of showed just the moxie that this kid has. Just the whole moxie that he has and just his presence. The offensive line last season for the Colorado Buffaloes was straight up garbage. They were one of the most troublesome teams trying to run the football last year. But we all seen, man, with Shedeur, him with a clean pocket, man, this guy's could pick you apart. And I just think that he has the moxie, whether it's to go to New York in a big-time media situation. I think he's geared up for that. I think he's been prepped for that. This guy's been in front of the camera since he's been a kid. Also, the whole situation with Cleveland, being the savior in Cleveland. I just think that for me, their whole situation for the Cleveland Browns, I think they definitely got to take Shedeur Sanders at number 2, because you got to get the quarterback situated, man, especially when you're paying Myles Garrett that big bag of money, man. Kevin Stefanski, I just think that, for them, they've got to get that situation right then up there in Cleveland. And obviously, we saw Travis Hunter run some routes, just to get his whole situation in, man. And, a lot of people saying, where he should go on offense or should defense. I just think that he's an NFL player, man, and I think that whoever drafts him, they're going to try to utilize him to the best of their ability. So we'll see what that thing do moving forward as well, man, up there for both of those two gentlemen, see where they fall at in the NFL draft. But we transition to the NBA. And as I mentioned, man, the NBA, man, especially in the Western Conference, man, is must-see TV. You got the Oklahoma City Thunder lock it in, the number 1 seed in the Western Conference. They got that, and they could be on the pace for potentially winning 70 games this year. But, they fell a little bit short of that. But for me, it's just who is 3 through 6, because Houston right now, they sitting in a solid spot. Shout out to Ime Udoka, just the job he's done down there in Houston. So they locked in pretty much at the number 2 seed. But then we got number 3 presently. You got the Los Angeles Lakers sitting at number 3. Right now you got Denver half a game behind them sitting at number 4. And then you got the Golden State Warriors a half a game behind Denver sitting in at number 5. And we can't forget about the Minnesota Timberwolves, man. They sitting a game behind Golden State. And so now with a handful of games that's left in the NBA season, a team like Minnesota could easily move from 6 to 3. Or the Lakers can fall from 3 to 6. And so that game last night between the Denver Nuggets and the Golden State Warriors was an epic game, especially based on the fact that you got Steph Curry and Nikola Jokic. And Jokic, man, is just, man, he was just cooking Draymond Green. And Draymond Green, all the talk about, him being Defensive Player of the Year, he lost a couple votes last night, man. I mean, Jokic is a tough cover for everybody, man. But just to see what he was able to do, Denver's a team that, I think could come out to West this year. They won the NBA championship a couple years ago. I think they can pull it off again, but it just all boils down to just the seeding. And I said this on my appearance, man, on the Weekly Dog Sports Betting Podcast, man, is that I think the West is straight up for grabs. There's been a lot of acrimony with the whole situation with the Oklahoma City Thunder, whether they contenders or pretenders. But I think that whoever falls anywhere between that 2 through 7 or 8 seed has a chance to potentially make a run in the Western Conference. The Dallas Mavericks, their team that's, trying to hold on for dear life at the number 9 seed, man. You got the Sacramento Kings, after making that trade with De'Aaron Fox and, bringing in Zach LaVine. They got an outside chance of holding on to that number 10 seed, man. And the Phoenix Suns, they're looking on the outside end, man, and making the NBA playoffs. It's just been an epic crash and burn, man, for the Phoenix Suns this season. Obviously, when you got Kevin Durant and Devin Booker and Bradley Beal in the same building, it's just a situation where you at least at minimum expect this team to win an NBA, to get into the NBA playoffs. A lot of people, when they linked up, they thought they was going to win an NBA championship. And I was one of them people drinking that Kool-Aid a little bit when they first linked up. But, I said it a couple episodes ago. I think Coach Bud Budenholzer, I just think he's lost his shine as a coach. And the players, they do get responsibility in all of this. But Bud, to me, he's just not a coach that I think will motivate guys. And, ever since that whole situation with Milwaukee, when they fired him after winning the NBA championship a couple years after that, to me, that's kind of set the table. That let me know just in regards. And so we'll see what it do, moving forward, man, across the Western Conference sporting landscape. As you look into the Eastern Conference itself, the Eastern Conference is really a 2-team race. You got the Boston Celtics, you got the Cleveland Cavaliers. They both locked into the 1st and 2nd seed. You got the New York Knicks that's in the fold right now. A lot of people don't feel that the Knicks is really a title contender. But, to me, I mean, they can, stretch, a couple of these teams, man, especially Boston and Cleveland. They may be able to give them kind of a competitive series, in itself. But I just think that those two teams are the best teams easily in the Western Conference itself. And so, I'm sorry, in the Eastern Conference itself. So it's going to be a showdown, man, as we move forward towards the latter part of the NBA season, as we wrap everything up. Coming up in my next episode, I'm also, too, going to break down my final Big Five, my Big Five teams across the NBA sporting landscape. Also, too, I'm going to hit you with my final situation, with the MVP race and what that thing do and what that thing unfolds, man. So I can't wait for that. Obviously, we're at Final Four weekend right now. Just got the latest game coming on tomorrow. We got the national championship coming on Monday on the men's side. And we got the Final Four coming up in a couple of hours. So first and foremost, man, I hope you guys sit back, relax, enjoy what we got across the sporting landscape. And also, too, man, I can't forget to send out some love, man, to Alexander Ovechkin of the Washington Capitals. He tied Wayne Gretzky last night against my Chicago Blackhawks, ironically. Tied him for all-time goal scorer in NHL history. And so it looks like he's going to break that record, man, before the end of the regular season. So congrats, man, to him. First and foremost, man, I appreciate all the love and the feedback. I appreciate your ear. We on Fire Sports Podcast, the spot.